Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are trying to have a prologue on Pranayam, the fourth limb of Ashtanga Yoga. And in the previous session, we took into consideration the confusion that is there between Shwasayama and Pranayam. Shwasayama itself has become Pranayam today. But the reason for that is that the breath is a major tool. The breathing aspect is subsuming the whole pranayamic process, permeating the whole pranayamic process, and therefore there is room for that confusion. With lack of education, the confusion gets reinforced. Basically, breathing has four aspects. Common man thinks it is only two aspects, that is in-breath and out-breath. But breathing, in formal education in yoga, considers four aspects, that is in-breath, out-breath, and between the in-breath and out-breath, the loop, suspension or retention, and between the out-breath and in-breath, loop, suspension and retention. So, for convenience it might be said that in-breath and post-in-breath retention, out-breath and post-out-breath retention. And when we consider these four cornered aspects of breathing, we can identify that there are enormous functions, extra respiratory functions to these. Certain things happen and are done along with inhalation, are better done along with inhalation, during inhalation. Certain things happen, are done and should be ideally done along with exhalation. And certain things post-exhalative, pre-inhalative, and post-inhalative and pre-exhalative. So certain things happen, certain things should be done, certain things are done, ideally should be done, in these four phases which I have spoken of today. So they have extra respiratory functions. Otherwise the in-breath and out-breath seems to be having only respiratory function, which is a shallow view, insufficient view, improper view. So it is important to identify what four aspects of breathing really can do and what happens during the four phases or four aspects of breathing. And there needs to be a formal observation. What is it that we do along with inhalation? What is it that we do post-inhalatively? What is it that we do along with exhalation, and what is it that we do post-exhalatively? So, a very formal observation is entailed to really go for pranayam formally. And as I said in the last session, that certain natural things such as hiccup, cough, sneezing, belching, farting, passing bowels, urination, they all have very important contribution of the breath. When I say breath, the four aspects of the breath. And it is important to understand these functions, which are extra respiratory functions. Obviously, they come in some kind of excretory processes and certain biological processes such as coughing, sneezing, belching, hiccups, vomiting, etc. or reflux. So one will understand that it is not just respiratory breathing, as is the notion about breath and breathing. It almost becomes synonymous, breathing and respiration. Respiration is respiration, which has a limited role, but most important role, that it keeps you living. While the role of breathing is not only keep you lively and living, but the breathing comes to contribute in the very process of living. So students of yoga in classical times were given to understand this. Another very important factor as a function of our breathing is human act of oration. The oratory act is unique to human beings. Subhuman creatures have their sounds, cries, chirps, various kinds of sounds of different animals and birds and insects. They only produce sounds, but human being produces a language. Why oratory act? There is oratory organ of speech, and one can easily identify the contribution of breathing in speech, because no speech can take place while the exhalation is on. Without exhalation, there is no speech. The speech is a form of exhalation. It is not that only exhalation is used for speech, but speech is by exhalation. And Upanishads come to describe this relationship between what Upanishads declare as Prana and Vacha or Vacha. So it is another very important function of breath. The speech will never take place inhalatively. The speech will never take place retentively, either internal retention or external retention. But the speech will only take place with and along with exhalation. So it's almost a material cause of speech. As much as the thought is material of speech, in what way the thought matter is material of speech is matter to be discussed. And in what way exhalation itself is material of speech also has to be identified. So, matter of speech needs thought matter as material cause. But for very speech, the exhalation is a material cause. So, it is really fascinating to understand the role of exhalations, role of inhalations, and role of retentions in the extra respiratory realm. And everyone is provided with a laboratory for it, academy for it, observatory for it. Each one should do it on one's own as to ascertain what are the extra respiratory acts of the breath and breathing. And what are the effects of natural, laborless, free breathing and effects of labored breathing? When there is difficulty to breathe, what all happens? And when there is ease in breathing, what all happens? So easy breathing contributes in some way, and difficult breathing contributes in some other way. So why the breathing should be easy? Why the breathing should be involuntarily happening and doing? How it is important? If that is obstructed, where we know what happens. So there can be threat to life on one hand, to facility to life on the other hand. Easy breathing definitely contributes for easy living. Although there are many other factors required for easy living, the breath is very fundamental, very organic. And when there is difficulty in breathing, we understand the difficulty in living. So, the point is, everyone is provided with the laboratory, observatory, academy to really carry out the study here with regards to this. And that should be done by every individual if inclined to learn something about yoga in general and something to learn about Pranayam, Shwasayama in particular. So each one is provided with the academy, laboratory, observatory, but man with hecticality of business of life doesn't find time for this. But this excuse cannot be there for students of yoga. You must find time to really carry out this kind of project, work on this project. What all the breath does and what all the four factors of breathing do. What the sharper breath does and what the softer breath does. If you are doing a physical endeavor, Herculean job, difficult job, or climb something like climbing the hill, how do you breathe? If you have to do some very delicate artistic work, how do you breathe? So even for tender and delicate activities, the breath comes significantly. And for martial kind of activity, the breath comes in another way. So how is the breathing when you are threading a needle? And how is the breathing when we are climbing up a hill or climbing up steps? Or when you are pouring water, lifting something, keeping down something, where significant labor is involved. When you are pelting a stone, how much the breathing comes there? In what way the breathing comes there? So, delicate act to a rough kind of act. How the breathing comes up, how the breathing is modified, how it is flexible and fluid system which can be adopting to any kind of cognitive act and cognitive act, motor activity and ideomotor activity, intellectual activity, emotional activity. So in emotional upheavals, how is the breathing? in mental upheavals, how is the breathing? This is something that has to be observed by students of yoga. Now, coming to Yogasanas, Yogasanas provide enormous kind of huge spectrum of facilities to really carry out breath studies, or what can be called as breathological studies. There are various kinds of Yogasanas as postures. Most of you are aware of certain classes such as upright poses, sitting poses, lateral bending poses, forward bending poses, backward bending poses, inversions, rotational poses. So we classify these postures based on configuration of body such as sitting, standing, upright, forward bending, backward bending, lateral rotations, inversions, contortions. So various configurations of the postures also provide a good facility to carry out breathological studies or breath studies, breathing studies. We breathe differently. The breathing is differently. We have to breathe differently. So we will get to know the whole repertoire of this breathing system by Yogasanas, which will be coming very handy for Pranayam. Apart from, of course, which I said, climbing a hill, climbing the steps and stairs, lifting the weight from bottom to up and up to down, pelting stones, throwing something, catching something. So, in our mundane activity, we have to carry out this kind of survey, observations, formal observations, even acts of such as you want to get up from sitting position, sit from standing position. So there are so many things in our body activities and mind activities. So we have to intentionfully try to carry out breath participation, breath usage in all the various kinds of activity: physical, mental, emotional, intellectual, easy, difficult, comfortable, uncomfortable. But the point is, asanas give you a wonderful, very formal study to read the breath and breathing in the light of Pranayam, Shwasayama. So doing an asana, getting to an asana, structuring an asana, attaining an asana, learning and struggling and attempting to get an asana, and then getting an asana, then trying to improve the asana and then perfect the asana. The breath is a force to reckon with. There are easy asanas, there are difficult asanas to do. There are easy asanas, there are difficult asanas to stay. There are easy asanas, difficult asanas to maintain. There are easy asanas and difficulty asanas to get penetration, access. So, in the light of breath usages, breathological perspective, the various aspects of doing an asana must be used with a greater advantage. Asanas are done, asanas are maintained, asanas are undone. So there is something called as upakrama, sthiti, upasambhara of every yogasana. How the breathing comes in and how the breathing should come in, how to handle the breath for upakrama, that is commencement, then sthiti, that is the state of asana, and upasambhara, that is undoing an asana, ending an asana, concluding an asana. There is obsession to learn an asana, do an asana, and by hook or crook we release an asana. This is not done. In asanas we have studied how this must be done quite meticulously and with scrupulous attention and scrupulous dynamics. Upakrama sthiti upasamhara. This was considered during the topic of asanas was described at length, discussed at length. And therein, the special attention should be given to breath now in the light of studying formally the Shwasayama and Pranayama aspects. So various asanas open out a lot of facility to really learn about these things, the usages, the applications, the addressers. So the breath is addressed, the breath is addressing, the breath is used, the breath is using, breath is applied, breath is applying. There are applications on the breath, there are applications by the breath, of the breath. So very formal study has to be carried out with regards to breathing processes in executing asanas in all their phases: doing, staying, maintaining, intensifying, developing penetration, access, efficacy, settling for comfort, absorption. Where breath is a very significant force, and it must be reckoned with and studied very, very closely and minutely. That will qualify one for Shwasayama and Pranayam better. Then there are various acts of Yogasanas which at length were described. The Ashtadasha Mahakriyas, how the breath comes in. Then there are certain nuances and implications of asanas. How the breathing comes in must be very formally studied. So, asanas provide exceptional academy, laboratory, observatory to carry out breath studies, breath usages, breath functions, breath roles, breath acts, where the breathing is benefactor. So also breathing as beneficiary is an implication of an asana. So when the breathing is beneficiary, how the breathing is done? If the breathing is benefactor, how the breathing is done? If there are benefits of the kind of benefits of the breath and benefits by the breath, how the breathing is. So it's a marvelous thing to really carry out study, and that is why I have been saying that at least 5-10% of your asana, every asana, there must be some dedication to breath studies and breath observations and breath engineering. How to use the breath, how to handle the breath, how to handle the breathing, how to use the breathing, how to apply the breathing. So that is what is the precept given in classical formal studies of asanas, practice of asanas, learning of asanas, that something should be dedicated to breath studies. And when you are rendering asanas in all its aspects of sthira sukham asanam, prayatna shaithilyam, prayatnam prayatna shaithilyam, prayatna shaithilya ananta samapatti-bhyam, tato dvandvam vighataha. So the sutra gives wonderful roadmap to carry out breath studies, breathological studies. So how the breath is used, breath is using, breath is applied, breath is applying, breath is addressed, breath is addressing, breath is considered, breath is considering. In all the various asanas that one might be doing, one must carry out this very formal and close observation. And asanas give wonderful training to really formally qualify for Shwasayama and Pranayam. Whereas today, in modern no yoga, there is possibly a divorce. Asana and Pranayam are two separate watertight compartments, and that's how people pursue. Asana means asana, Pranayam means Pranayam. They have become watertight compartments, which is the outcome of lack of education that you find in present system of imparting yoga or teaching yoga or instructing yoga. And in Yogasanas Ashtadasha Mahakriyas, there was a kriya called Prana Kriya. Then you have Chakra Kriya and Tattva Kriya, which inducts you to a Prana aspect. What is Prana? How it is different than Shwasa? How it is closely associated with Shwasa or almost closely, totally merged with Shwasa? What's the difference between Shwasa and Prana? Is something again is to be formally observed and studied. So, Shwasa is your breathing, comprising of Shwasanam, Shwasa Pratshwasa, Shwasotshwasa. But then why? What is Pranayam? So we have discussed Panchakoshas. I would request ardent student to go back and once again try to study the Panchakoshas described in a series of lessons on an earlier occasion. Therein Pranamaya Kosha was mentioned. So I will not be losing time delineating on a Prana Shakti, Pranamaya Kosha. So it is important that one carries out study, formal study, in the light of Shwasayama and Pranayam pursuits as to what is Prana Shakti. The Pran, as described by the text, is Vishwa Chaitanya Shakti. Vishwa is universal and cosmic. Chaitanya is consciousness. And Shakti is the power. So, Vishwa Chaitanya Shakti is the definition of Pran textually. So I've just given little hint at it. So we need to once again carry out formal study of Pranamaya Kosha, Prana Kriya, and have some clarity. Anyway, the Pranayam commences with Shwasayama. So we will have to understand Patanjali's sutras on Pranayam as Shwasayam and then proceed to understand what is Pranayam. Shwasayam, Pranayam have a distinction. Shwasayam doesn't do what Pranayam does. Shwasayam does something foundational, but Pranayam does something structural. So again, referring to Shastras, let me tell you that there is the quotation to the effect, Pranayamaihir daher doshan. That Pranayam destroys the defects, the faults of the human defects in the consciousness. And Patanjali endorses with this with a sutra, Tatah Kshiyate Prakasha Varnam. So what are these doshas, defects? These are doshas which are creating a cloud around the consciousness, and the consciousness becomes clouded. And those are the defects, those are Rajatama Gunas. And Patanjali endorses with this by a sutra, Tata Kshiyate Prakashavaranam. Shwasayama doesn't do this. It doesn't remove the defects of your psyche. It might work for de-dirting your body matter and mind matter, but it doesn't go beyond, while Pranayam does it. So, it should be understood that the Pranayam commences as Shwasayama. So let's try to understand Shwasayama in the light of Pranayam Sutra by Patanjali, but we will do that in our next session. Enough for the time being. Namaskar all of you.